Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Fight Against Bias panel honoring National Women's Equality Day. Today, we'll be talking about women's equality in the workplace, meaning women being recognized for their achievements, promotions, and opportunities to own and lead projects, and compensation and bonuses. With me today, I have Salima Syed, Chief Operating Officer and Head of Global Field Marketing here at Cisco Collaboration. I have Christina Dvorak, Integrated Campaigns Program Manager, also here at Cisco, and Tamina Stoll, who works at LinkedIn as the Global Women External Network Lead. Our first question will start with Salima. Women's voices are essential in decision-making processes. How can we encourage and support more women to enter leadership positions?
Thank you, Lena. I think that's a very, very critical question as we talk about the equality in workplace for women, right? To encourage more women to enter not just the workplace, to leadership positions, because that is where the equality starts coming in. As you grow in your career, those are the gaps that we need to fill in. So it's crucial to address both systematic and individual barriers, right? We cannot talk about equality without talking about what exists within the system for years and many different generations, and the personal barrier as you as a woman might have. So implementing mentorships, sponsorship programs can provide great guidance and support to aspiring female leaders, because when they're lost, they have somebody to hold on to, ask questions, and move on. And at the same time, from a systematic perspective, creating safe places for women to network, share their experiences, relate to each other on how they can build their confidence is also really, really important. So, additionally, if you look at organization, it should start not once after we recruit the women and bring them into the fold of the organization. It should start before that. We should be actively providing, eliminating bias while recruitment and promotional processes. So when you're actually trying to give a training on rewards program and how do you promote, you have to call that out and say, okay, what is the diversity proportion in your team, and how do you make sure that you give that small lane for women to kind of grow. So I think that is very, very important. Again, leadership training, specifically focusing on, how do you help women who have to overcome these barriers. And that will help a great deal in not just building necessary skills, but also confidence, because that is what we need. We need to break the cycle that, no, you have to be perfect to ask for this. I need to know like 10 things if they need for a job. I need to know all 10 things before I raise my hand. So that's kind of some of the things I think it's so important to encourage women in leadership and, to break the cycle.
Tamina, what do you think about that?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Been really looking forward to this. I 100% agree with Salima about the importance of breaking down those systemic barriers. But I would even go as far as saying women do not need more encouragement. It's 2023. Women are very eager to become leaders. It is not our lack of talent and motivation or even fear that is holding women back. It is precisely those systemic barriers that are holding women back. And this narrative around women needing more encouragement is actually pretty similar to this narrative around the infamous imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is indeed very real. I've experienced it, and I bet every single woman on this panel has experienced it as well. But I'm honestly quite tired of us talking about it and organizations constantly offering one imposter syndrome workshop after the other. Why? Well, because if we keep convincing every single woman out there that she's supposed to feel like an imposter in any and every space she's entering, we shift the focus of the conversation towards fixing women as opposed to dismantling the systemic discrimination that results in women and minorities feeling insecure and unwelcome in the first place. So instead, let's just shift the focus of the conversation away from encouraging the individual woman to building organizations that are indeed equitable, because at the end of the day, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not.
Christina, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, so it's difficult to follow that up. From my perspective, as somebody who's recently entered the workforce and who has known who wants to be a leader one day, the biggest thing that has helped me over the last year and feeling more confident that hopefully like one day I will achieve my goal is by learning from other leaders, female leaders specifically at Cisco. So female mentors, and luckily we have a structured mentorship program. So I've been able to connect and to learn from them, and mainly learning how do they navigate the inequalities that we're experiencing within Cisco. And the best way we can learn to navigate those is through those that have already experienced them. So I'm really thankful that I've had that opportunity. And I hope that one day I can do that as well for another fellow female worker who wants to be a leader one day.
I love that. I can resonate with so much of what each of you said. Salima, from the mentorship, I know that there's been plenty of times in my career where I could have benefited from a mentor, and I've benefited from even peer-to-peer mentorship. I believe that's another thing that I think is really great to cultivate. And then Tamina, I really loved your points about imposter syndrome. What if I don't have imposter syndrome? What if I'm really confident in what I do and I know I can do it? What if, it's a job that I've never done before, but I'm confident I can figure it out? I agree. I feel like the narrative around fixing women, and we see this a lot, as a working mother with a young child and who's pregnant and going to have another child, we see this a lot with mothers too, of like how to fix the mom or how to fix the mother in the workplace. So thank you everyone for your thoughts. Our next question, we'll start with Tamina. How can we create inclusive workplaces that support and empower women, including addressing issues such as workplace harassment and fostering work-life balance?
I really love that question, Lena. So referring back to what I was mentioning earlier, it's absolutely critical that we focus on dismantling systemic discrimination and barriers. But we need we need leaders at the top who are not afraid to step up, because organizations can only succeed in creating truly inclusive workplaces if their leaders, and I'm not only referring to, let's say, board members and C-suite level executives, but across all levels of leadership, can only succeed if everyone across leadership truly believes in the transformative power and the strategic importance of DEI. I don't know why, but somehow there's this big misconception that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a zero-sum game, but that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Companies that have more women on their boards and in senior leadership positions are financially more successful than companies that have less diverse leadership, right? So creating inclusive workplaces that address topics like, avoiding workplace harassment and fostering that work-life harmony, as I like to call it, it's not only the morally right thing to do, it's also the most economically sound thing to do for companies, but it does require right leaders at the top to recognize that. I would say that the days where people follow these, like overly polished, aloof, cutthroat leaders in black suits are long over. I know that most women are over it, or probably have never been fans of that approach to begin with. And I know that my generation, the one after me, is wholeheartedly rejecting it. So I think in summary, we need leaders who are compassionate, who are authentic, who are approachable, and who aren't afraid to show up vulnerably, and who are willing to acknowledge and address their past mistakes. And I genuinely believe that companies and leaders who don't recognize that will have serious trouble recruiting female talent and acquiring female customers in the future.
I agree, Tamina. And of course, there's that great Brene Brown quote, vulnerability is a superpower. And whenever I have a leader that can show up and show the human side of themselves, I feel that much more passionate about working for them and doing a great job. Christina, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I love what you just said, Lena. My team, we actually have a phrase that we always like to remind each other of: be human. It sounds so simple, but what I love about my team is that like we're allowed to be human. And that means that sometimes you need to log off early when you're having a bad day mentally or something has occurred. Or once a month, we have brain break days where we all get to log off and do something for ourselves. Having that flexibility and permission to be vulnerable, although I don't think that we should have to require permission to be vulnerable, I feel as though in my team, I am in an environment that gives me permission to be who I want to be as a human and to be vulnerable and express what I'm experiencing at that moment. And we all do our best work when we're able to be human and work when it's the best time for ourselves and when we're feeling good, because that's when we do our best work. But I think another component of this question I wanted to think about was workplace flexibility. And I think around like women equality and opportunity in the workforce has improved since the pandemic, being able to work remotely and a hybrid workplace. And I think a key component I'm seeing and a key issue I'm seeing with this is that sometimes a company that has workplace flexibility doesn't always view people who work virtually to be equal to those who are in person. Sometimes people who work virtually are viewed to not be as committed and dedicated to the company and viewed to not do as good work as those that are in person. And I think we also need to reframe that mentality that we have this opportunity for people to work in the environment that is the best for them, and we're all doing great work. And if people who are working from home are viewed to not be as committed, that could also contribute to people who aren't going to be considered for leadership positions and managerial positions. So not only do we need to provide these opportunities, and everybody benefits from being able to work from home, especially parents, and we have to view everybody as equal in the work that they're doing, whether it's from home or in person, in order to allow everybody to continue their career progression the way that they want to.
Thank you, Christina. And we're so lucky here at WebEx or Cisco Collaboration that that's our ethos, is providing an equitable and inclusive workplace no matter where you work. So whether that's from the office, at home, or somewhere in between, that we're provided a seat at the table. And Salima, I'd love to get your perspective from an executive standpoint.
Absolutely. I think you know, there's a lot of great things that both of you mentioned about having to create an inclusive workplace, right? Me personally, for the last 30 years in this being in the industry, I think last 15 years, I have worked in a remote environment. So overnight pandemic, everybody started working from home, and I did not like that because I like to be the one who is working from home, not everybody, right? But I think it was important. There is an onus for each person. Yes, there is an expectation that you're working from home. So when it comes to leadership positions, you want to be part of the headquarters. You want to be part of the water cooler discussions. And sometimes, most of the times, I think in the before pandemic, I'd like to say before pandemic and after pandemic era, right? They were passed on as, oh, you're not here in front of everybody all the time. But things changed overnight, right? Pandemic really gave us a window into what could be and what is possibility. And it was not, it really turned things around. Now, going back to the question of how do we create an inclusive workspace? As a leader, all of my team members, and I've always had team members in a hybrid environment. I have actively hired people who are remote, because that gives them that gives me the flexibility to hire people who are amazing, not really thinking about where they are, what they're located. Can they come to the office 9 to 5? I never look at that. I look at whether they have the skill set. Can they deliver? Can they be successful? Can they be committed? Can they be productive in the time, whatever time that they are committing to do the work? And I have people on my team who worked with me for over 10, 15 years, over multiple organizations, working in the remote. And I would say, frankly, they have been extremely successful and effective, right? So as a leader, it is not the onus is on me to make them feel included, right? And how do we do that? We have daily stand-ups that we kind of all get in on 10 minutes, and we talk about, okay, what is on top of your mind? What are you? So the person who's in the office versus on the phone or wherever does not feel like they're excluded, right? We are in I've been in a consulting organization in the Big Fives for a long time as well. And, you are constantly, it's a global environment. It's a global industry. It's no more about where you're headquartered and where you are not. But I think it is very important. I know that, Tamina, we talk about, we don't need to give people the confidence. The people are having the leaders and the women have the confidence, but we also have to look at the generation of women who exist in the work industry, right? I think it is extremely important. I have an 18-year-old daughter. I don't have to tell her what confidence means any time at all, right? And you look at it if you're looking at leaders at whatever level they are, or who are going into the C-suite, there is a systematic, need to be able to pull you in terms of, they are very rule followers. If you say you cannot work from home, they don't work from home. They don't question that. So I think as an organization, it is so important to have a not one facet approach towards inclusivity. You need to look at women in different areas. In marketing is different. In technology and coding, they are different mindset and backgrounds. So you're talking about, we always, when we say diversity, it's always about women. But within women, we have diversity, guys. Let's embrace that, right? We have women coming from very different backgrounds, whether it is financial, whether it is religious, or whatever it is, right? Different backgrounds. You're talking about industry. Like, I am I come from the technology industry, right? Long ago as a coder, but it is a complete different mindset when you get into marketing, or when you get into strategy, when you get into different aspects. So an organization, when they think of women, and when they have to think about sub-diversities as well. When people say, oh, we have 5%, 10%, or 20% women, okay, what kind of diversity? You don't check a mark. Diversity is not a number. It's about how diverse thought process are you bringing in, and ideas you're bringing into your workplace. Let's make that clear. By bringing women in and bringing them in as a first step, I think we've crossed that. I agree that we've crossed that. There is no question that women bring a different perspective. You need to go into the next level now. You need to address what kind of diversity and voice are you giving these women when you bring them in? Are you just making it a statistic? Are you actually not just, I think gone are the days, to wrap up, where organizations have to give us a seat at the table. Not anymore. They need to give the women a voice at the table, because seat is taken for granted now. Seat is more of a diversity number. So I think creating, trainings for leaders as they're hiring, the leaders as they're growing up, to talk about how to think about all of these things, creating very clear, specific anti-harassment policy, and making sure that you're being flexible with your remote workers, your flexible hours in terms of coming into office, so that they can accommodate women's diverse responsibilities. And of course, I think Cisco is a great example of how we take care of the paid parental leaves, childcare support, and all of that is going to be extremely important. So it is no more about just making it an inclusive workplace for women. It is more of an inclusive workspace for the diversity that exists within the women group as such. So.
Salima, you bring up such a great point that when we talk about diversity and equality and women in general, sometimes I feel like the picture of women is two-dimensional, but we are really like 3D, 4D, virtual reality. Like there's so much to us as women. So love that. Thank you for bringing that up. My third question is going to start with Christina. In what ways can we challenge and dismantle gender stereotypes in the workplace that limit women's opportunities and choices?
This was the hardest question for me to answer, so going first is a bit nerve-wracking.
No problem. No, these are all hard questions. I mean, and there is no real right answer. That's why we put together this panel with everyone's diverse perspective, because we want to just know what you think. Yeah. So don't worry about getting it right.
Thank you.
You got this, Christina.
Thank you. Okay. So although in marketing, I do work in an environment where there's likely more women than men, all too often I hear my friends who work in finance and technology industries that it's a more male-dominated work environment and team. And I wanted to make sure that I really represent their experiences while I'm speaking on this panel, because I hear these stories every day, every week, and it's so difficult seeing my friends navigating these issues. And quite frequently, I hear about how in male-dominated fields, they frequently experience the boys' club environment. And this forces women to either go along with it, sometimes adopting that cool girl stereotype just to fit in and try to be accepted by the men. Or if they try to express themselves and be their authentic selves, it tends to be rejected. And another aspect is sometimes when we're trying to achieve the approval of the larger group of people we're surrounded by, it can sometimes lead to competitiveness, maybe amongst women. And I think that is a key issue that we're still all trying to navigate. Is not only are we trying to figure out equality amongst men and women, but also how do we foster an environment where women aren't forced to compete with each other? Because if we're trying to get our voices heard, then how do we ensure that we're doing it while respecting all of each other's voices and also trying to get our voices heard?
No, I love that you brought up the experiences of your peers that work in different industries. I think it's hard because I've been at Cisco now for 2 years and my brain is sort of wiped out the rest of my work experience, where I have experienced that boys club and adopting the cool girl mentality. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I'm a millennial. I have 100% chameleoned myself to be accepted by the guys. And instead of being and showing up as my authentic self. And I'm excited that it seems like things are moving towards where women can just show up as they are, like, and whatever that means for them, and whatever, no more chameleoning, right? So I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. Salima, I'd love to get your perspective on this. And I love that when you bring up your daughter who's 18, because she's like she's going to be entering the workforce, right? In say,
I mean, I'm actually, she just started, this is a college drop-off week for her. So I am, we are empty nesters, and it's hard to let go and have them, you all you can do is pour in all these things into them and be a role model, so that they can stand up for themselves and take it to the world, right? And I think that's why I am super charged and energized, but what I see in the next generation, right? And as they are growing, because rightfully or wrongfully, there's a jaded thought process that comes into, because of, you are who your inner child is, and who you are, who your core memory is. And as we in my generation, I don't want to date myself, grew up, there was a lot of no, you can't, or this is not for you, and came up. And I grew up in the Middle East. Grew up in Saudi Arabia. It's as backward as can it get during those times. Of course, there's a lot of progressive thought process going into it right now, but in spite of it, my immediate core family had enabled me to break that gender stereotype. And being a Muslim, being from India, growing up in the Middle East, it brought me the global vision to the role I wanted to play in this society, versus I am supposed to play this role, and that it was. But not many people are lucky enough to have that support or the background, right? I think one of the things that we as always struggle with, if as women you are more pushing, then you're like, oh my God, she's so bossy, or she's so loud, and she's pushing, and she's doing this and all of that. But the same exact thing is different when it comes from a different counterpart, colleague counterpart. So first of all, I think I've been very lucky to be part of organizations prior to Cisco as well, where this was basically the foundation on which I come from, Duo, on which the company was built. Being kinder than necessary was a strategic pillar of an organization. So when you say that out in every meeting, every different conversation you're having, all the way from the top to the bottom, it becomes like you forget what gender you are, or what kind of a background you are, or what box you fit into. You are I think, like you said, Christina, like you're a human, and you have to be kinder than necessary to whoever it is. And I think that alone breaks that challenge you have towards a gender stereotyping, right? Look in and see who you are, before you kind of figure out what the boxes that you're putting people on. But I think it is important in huge organization, big organization, to really take intentional step to dismantle it, right? You have to make sure that, I don't want to call it as DEI, because it's become more like a DEI. Every company has a DEI organization now, right? But really, it is diversity and inclusion, equity. We should have it, right? And I think it is important to make sure that you lay the foundation by creating clear and comprehensive principle and strategy on what it means to you at an organization level. But it doesn't stop there. You are immediate as a manager, whether you have 2 people, 3 people on the team, it doesn't matter. You are the CEO of your organization. You have to be able to see what kind of culture do you want your team to have, whether it is 2 people or 3 people, or whatever that is, right? So building that strategy and diversity and inclusion intentionally, having the leadership commitment to it, having policies that clearly say, how do you break, if there is a situation, how do you highlight some of these things that are happening, and putting out examples, it's important. How do you highlight successful women within the organization as role models, to be able to inspire others? I think it is very extremely important as well.
Tamina, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely, Lena. Christina, first of all, wanted to share that what you mentioned about the boys network and internalized patriarchy really resonated with me, because growing up I actually wanted to become a sports reporter and host, and when I was still in college I was working as a sports reporter for a local radio station, part-time, and as you can imagine, very male-dominated environment. I was only 1 out of 2 women, and it was tough. There was a lot of looking back. I now know today that there was a lot of discrimination, which at the time was disguised as jokes, right?
Ooh.
And so that really resonated with me. And I also have a lot of female friends who work in finance and mentors who refer to themselves as Wall Street survivors because that's how bad it was. And to be quite frank, based on what I'm hearing today, in certain environments still is. So I think we as a society simply have a lot of unlearning to do. And let's be real, it's hard because many of us have been conditioned to think a certain way for decades. And no matter how woke or engaged you are in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, all of us at the end of the day have unconscious bias. And unfortunately, women, and even more so women whose identities intersect with other marginalized social dimensions. I love the point Salima made earlier about the importance of intersectionality. You know, we women are disproportionately affected by unconscious biases, and those unconscious biases aid in nurturing those gender stereotypes. And to be clear, it's not necessarily that unconscious bias itself that I consider the most dangerous in this context. It's actually the lack of individual people's awareness of having unconscious bias that is dangerous, because a lack of awareness leads to ignorance, and ignorance leads to systemic discrimination. So what can we do about dismantling these stereotypes? No, I think it does go back to responsible and compassionate leadership. And let me maybe illustrate that point by sharing an anecdote from an experience I had a few years ago at the beginning of my career. So at a company-wide all-hands meeting many years ago, one of our former senior leaders, who was a white, middle-aged hetero man, was presenting. And whenever he referred to clients or client decision makers, he would very intentionally use she, her pronouns. So the fact that this stood out to me shows that we still have a long way to go before we've truly overcome patriarchal heteronormativity, right? But it also shows that there is a lot of power and potential in company leaders and people who have a platform to leverage their power and influence to challenge the status quo and be a change agent. Because if a senior leader in one of the biggest tech companies in the world is publicly showing up as an ally, that can have such a huge impact on workplace culture and then how women perceive their opportunities to succeed in said workplace. And unfortunately, based on my perspective, there are many senior leaders in corporate America who are not aware of the level of responsibility that they carry by virtue of the platform that they have as a direct result of their big titles, right? But we need leaders who address and work on implementing solutions that solve for things like we talked about it earlier, like the motherhood penalty, for example, or inclusive parental leave policies, or going back to internalized patriarchy, the likability penalty. All of these things, they add up and they are a direct result of gender stereotyping.
Thank you. I think everyone did a really great job answering this hard question. Christina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I have a follow-up thought. Tamina, just when I was listening to your response, I resonated with it so much. And it reminded me of in school in psychology, learning about just we as humans innately want to be accepted. We want to be part of a community. We want people to like us. And what is so difficult is that when we are in an environment that is, in a way, questioning who we are and what we want to be, then it's questioning whether we want to be accepted by the group or not. And I think one of the things that we could do to challenge these workplace environments is definitely empowering and telling women that we do not need to be liked by these boys' clubs. We do not need to be cool girls. We can be who we want to be. And maybe then the men aren't going to like us. But I think the most important thing is that we know that we are being who we want to be. And I think other women will resonate with that as well.
Well, that about wraps it up. I want to thank my panel so much for being with us today and talking about the fight against bias and women's equality. Everyone, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more from WebEx.